Hello, everyone, and welcome to Chamberland. Here we are in San Francisco at the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce for a future-ready business, leadership imperatives to reinvent and outmaneuver uncertainty, part 2. We're going to start in about 10 seconds. Good afternoon. My name is Rodney Fong, President and CEO of the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome you to this very, very important webinar session, just talking about the future. Clearly, COVID-19 has really had an impact on all of us, our businesses, personal lives here in San Francisco, around the world, and how, in the business world, we are all going to shift. We've used the word pivot so many times, it's become sort of a novel word. But this transition, this cloud journey is so important for all of us, whether you're a small business and needing to shift to the cloud, whether you're a big business and shifting, or for us right now to learn from some of the businesses that have already fully engaged into the cloud journey, what their lessons have been. This is a reinvention of business for many of us. This is Cloud Journey 101 for a lot of us, and for some of us, this is a great opportunity to share experiences again. So from CEOs to small businesses here at the Chamber of Commerce, we represent them all, and we have them all within our membership, and I'm sure each one of them is interested in figuring that out. Today, we are joined by a very great, fantastic group. Alexis Hui from with the Gap, and he is the head of technology, strategy, and operations. And Arwana is the Vice President of Worldwide to-go-to-market Green Lake Cloud Service, a part of HP Enterprises. And Matt Ross, who is with Accenture and is the Managing Director of Intelligent Cloud Infrastructure for the US West Coast. So if I could, maybe just turn it over to Matt to give us a little bit of overview, and then we can get into some questions, and I encourage folks in the chat to ask questions in the chat and just start a little very open dialogue on a complex piece of the new world post-COVID. So Matt, if you take it away.
Yep, very good. Thank you, Rodney. Appreciate it. So thanks for having me on this call. What I was going to start with is just a little overview of a survey that we recently did. So we basically put a survey out about a year ago across 8,000 companies, 20 industries, 22 different countries. And we asked a set of questions across 3 different areas, right? The first area is how fast and how are you using new technologies such as cloud, AI, blockchain, et cetera. The second set of questions was around, to what extent have you integrated those new technologies in your core business processes? And then the third set of questions was around, how ready is your organization and your talent for accepting those new technologies, right? And our objective of these set of questions was to both understand, is there a business difference for the clients and the organizations that are adopting technologies more quickly? And what are some of the challenges and major challenges that they're running into as part of this transformation? And interesting, what came out of that study was we were able to organize clients into a variety of different sectors, but the largest way we did is we organized clients either into this top leaders section, and that section were the clients that were adopting technologies more quickly. They were integrating them in their business processes, and then they were also rotating their talent and their operating model to support those, versus the laggards, which we organized as the bottom 25%. And what was an interesting finding that we had was that for the leaders in that group, their revenue growth was growing 2 times faster than the laggards. So clearly there's a competitive advantage for adopting technology, but it's also very important that is adopting those new technologies, you're identifying how to integrate them into critical processes, as well as making sure you're organizationally ready and your talent's ready to go. And I think this exists, across, regardless of the size of the organization. I think the journey you take on some of these technologies might be a slightly different path based on your size and the complexity of your environment. And we'll talk about that a little bit today. So as we move on to cloud, specifically around technology, I was going to start this session off with just a point of view that we've developed within Accenture across working with many of our clients on some of the best practices on migrating or transforming into cloud. So first, we view that you have to start the journey with the end in mind and what the business value you're trying to drive, right? And typically that business value comes in some type of cost transformation or cost takeout. There's some type of IT or business agility that you're trying to get. There's also a business growth agenda, and the business growth agenda might be a little bit more opaque and aspirational, but having it defined and understood within your organization is really important. And then finally, in the day of COVID, right, clearly there's some big advantages for COVID and overall operational resiliency by being able to turn new technologies and capabilities up within the cloud very quickly. And what we've seen looking across, these transformations we've done with some of our clients is we have a few recommendations. They're not right for everyone, and I'll give some of the context around it, but there's reasons why we think there's some best practices on how to do it. So the first best practice is, we think for most clients is you should migrate to cloud quickly and then modernize second. And the reason we believe that is the journey to go to cloud is fairly complex, and the skills you need to get you there, to operate and to drive there are going to be within your organization and outside of your organization, and doing it in a very deliberate manner is important to do that and avoid risk. The second point is getting the most from the hyperscalers. And what we mean here is most clients should select a primary hyperscaler to partner with to do this journey. And once again, this comes back to typically the hyperscalers are willing to invest fairly significantly within clients, depending on your size, and also bringing skills to the table. Over time, most clients will probably move towards a hybrid cloud and multi-cloud environment, but our recommendation as you're going into your first primary cloud or your public cloud is selecting a single cloud provider to partner with is very important to reduce complexity. Also, within the get the most from the hyperscalers, we think you should select a system integrator that you partner with as well, so you can leverage their talent. And that system integrator may be very different, right? If you're a 50 employee company, it might be a local company that has those technology skills. If you're a $10 billion company, it might be a client like a partner like Accenture or one of the other system integrators that can bring the full scale and value. Once you've migrated into the cloud and you've got your partnership set up, the third thing that we recommend is you start figuring out how to modernize on that cloud, right? If you look at AWS invested $23 billion in R&D last year to innovate on their cloud platform, bringing out a variety of services around PaaS, around network, around storage, around AI and analytics. And it's very important that once you get onto cloud, you start figuring out how to leverage those services to improve your business, whether that's operational resiliency, or cost takeout, or business innovation. And then once again, you're going to need the right ecosystem around you to do that. The fourth thing as we talk to people about cloud is once you move into cloud, you're going to run and optimize it differently, right? Historically, clients would go buy equipment for their IT estate. You might buy it up front, run it for 5 years, and then 5 years later, you'd go buy a new set of equipment and you'd roll that out again with your partner. What we see in cloud is it's really an evergreen service, right? You're getting the innovation when you buy it, and it's empowering you to turn things on and turn things off. But it does require a very different type of governance and the way that you run it, the way you manage it, and the way that you procure it. So being deliberate and understanding that that's going to change is also equally important. And then the final one is the innovate and grow. And like I said up front, this is really probably the most opaque, but it's also the most valuable piece of it. How are you going to take a business process, a business relationship, whether it's B2B or B2C, and get more value out of the cloud, whether it's through analytics and data-driven insights, or whether it's through automating a remote connection process for your remote worker? Those are the real values that you're going to get out of cloud long-term. So these are 5 of the key ways to maximize values. There's multiple ways of doing these different things, but these are some of the best practices that we've seen across a wide variety of different organizations. So Rodney, I'll hand it over to you or Alexis or Arwa to start with the questioning.
Thank you, Matt. That is fantastic. And you know what, from this conversation and our previous one, really sense the sense of urgency as everyone is changing. And while cloud technology has been out there pre-COVID, there is certainly a rush to make that transition for many companies. What I'm also picking up from our previous conversations is setting up the infrastructure correctly to fit your business, the size of business, your anticipated growth seems to be, like many things, the foundation is so important going forward. So beginning to appreciate that. I want to bring Arwa and Alexis into this conversation. And just if we can talk about just that, how should companies go about? Alexis, you've had personal experience in transforming the company, parts of the company into cloud, into maybe even a hybrid situation, and some thoughts, some maybe real life examples, some thoughts of how you did it right, how people can learn going forward. And I want to hear from Arwa as well, if that's possible, but some examples of the right setup at the right time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Rodney, and really happy to be here. And Matt, great tee up. I think from my perspective and from Gap Inc., yes to everything you stated. Maybe just going back on one of the points that I thought you hit that really resonated for us at Gap, Matt. And around why cloud is particularly important for business today. For us at Gap Inc., when we talk about the cloud, the real driver for us is really about the public cloud, because that's where we see the scale and innovation really unlocking the most value for us. And if you just look at the total spend that tech companies are putting into their cloud capabilities, as Matt mentioned, it's enormous, right? And it just doesn't make sense for most businesses to try to reinvent and do that themselves. It makes a lot more economical sense to leverage that and just not reinvent the wheel. So huge opportunity there, I think, for all businesses to take advantage of, and it's something at Gap Inc. that we're incredibly hyper-focused on. In terms of our journey, to your question around that, Rodney, and some of the experiences and learnings coming out of that, to Matt's point as well, it's, the cloud journey for us really started even way back, roughly early on in 2016 or earlier. And a lot of that was primarily around experimentation at that point, and trying to really understand, as our cloud providers were maturing out in our marketplace, whether it's AWS, Azure, et cetera, how is this really going to work for our organization, and how do we need to think about it, and really test and learn through that process. So that was kind of step one for us, to kind of dip our toe into it, which I think is a good thing for all businesses to think about. Where we are now today, I think the time to take your time on it is gone. I just think, given our business environment and pace to move quickly, you've got to move fast through this. So at Gap Inc., as we've been moving through this process and journey, we really looked at this as a focused investment and a highly structured program, all the way from top down, at our executive team leader up to the board, in terms of how important the cloud was for Gap Inc. to transform. So we kicked off our focus journey really in early 2019 to go full bore on this. And we've moved aggressively through that, from 2019 to 2020. And this is going to be a multi-year journey that we're continuing to move through. And, I think a big part about it right now for us is just be aggressive about it, learn through the process. You're going to learn from it. And there's a huge amount of change management involved as well. And right now, where we are in that journey, it's really been phenomenal, going through it, where our core tech stack across our entire digital and supply chain footprint is fully up in the cloud now. And it's paid off in spades with a ton of business benefits for our business and for our customers as well. And going through this right now, we also have a commitment to get the rest of it done, right? And it's continue to migrate a lot of our data platforms and leverage a lot of the great ML and data capabilities that Matt talked about that's available out there, as well as on our business processes. So our back office systems, whether it's finance, HR, they're also part of all of this as well. And we're continuing to leverage the cloud on that front as well. So it's just a huge benefit for all companies to really look at this and how to accelerate.
Or I know you've had a lot of experience at HP Enterprises in this transformation and have been in the space for a little while. Maybe you can share a few things that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love everything that Alexis talked about, because I think, if you look at any company or any business, right, you as the senior leadership of that organization really have to think about your business outcome. And effectively, what we're all looking for is someone to abstract away all the complexity and serve us sort of the right technologies in the right quantities at the right time. Again, with the right level of capability to, automate or create these sort of net new capabilities, whether it's ML or analytics. So everything that Alexis talked about is dead on. I have a little bit of experience in both worlds, right? I came from the public cloud. I came from multiple startups that innovated on all the like amazing development technologies that started to fuel sort of the mobile development revolution. And I'm also with HPE GreenLake, right? So it was really important for me to also think about, as I talk to different CIOs and sort of different executives or IT leaders. And there was a very pertinent question, I think, that came up here, which is, hey, do you see what the right mix between cloud and private cloud is, right? And what belongs in the cloud and what potentially, do I have better governance or control or cost savings over if I leave on-prem? And I do actually think that is the right question because, in my career at both hybrid, or what I'll call private cloud or on-prem, and public cloud, I would tell you that 90% of companies say that it's both for them, right? There's the 10% that are going to be all in, in one or another. So either you're incredibly sort of, you have to lock it down and maybe you're a defense organization for a top, country, you might not have the option to do cloud because nothing can ever leave, the four walls. Or you might be a cloud first company, right? Maybe you're a Netflix or you were born in the cloud. And then there's the 90% that are sitting there going, what belongs where? And so what I would advise this group of sort of professionals is think about data gravity, right? So if you have a heavy data gravity set, that's where you might want to bring the cloud to your own sort of data set. Think about app entanglement or data entanglement. That could also be really hard to sometimes quickly parse out. That might not be where you want to get started. Think about compliance, control, and flexibility to integrate into your existing environment, right? So if you have an existing environment that genuinely creates the level of technology IP for you that you need to maintain, then that's another reason where you might want the cloud to come to you versus you go to the cloud. The great news is the innovation is coming to us at all levels. What public cloud has done is completely changed how we think about technology and how we think about building it ourselves. And I think now we all get to be the beneficiaries of all of the fantastic tech companies now bringing that tech to us in a way that makes sense to us as companies. So what I would tell you is, look at all of the pros of public cloud. Look at what the strengths of the, by the way, you've got GCP, you've got AWS, you've got Microsoft Azure, you've got Oracle Cloud, you've got Ali Cloud. I mean, there are IBM obviously has their cloud. There are no shortage. There are lots of investments out there that these companies will make available to you and try to help you in your journey. Again, depending on your footprint, obviously they'll invest more or less. The partner ecosystem has never been richer, right? What Accenture can provide from an overall expertise perspective to help you analyze. I mean, Accenture has their own hybrid cloud as well that we have a joint partnership in. But ultimately, you have to do your homework and you have to understand the business outcome and then bring the right solution to it. Because, there are many companies where one or the other would make sense, but for their business, and it might not then make sense for another business to copy and paste that capability.
Fascinating, really, how many different features and options. And I'm really curious, over the last 5-10 years, how much the cloud world has grown. And this is a little bit of a futuristic question. Do we think in the next 5-10 years, exponentially, the offerings out there in the public cloud world are going to be 10 times, 100 times what they were in the past 5 years?
I think quick comment on that, Rodney. I think, so first of all, a year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when I would go talk to clients about cloud, the conversation was almost 100% about technically, how do I get there, right? How do I migrate something? How do I move it on the cloud? And I would tell you where we're at now, right, is the biggest pitfall I go into any client when they're looking at going into cloud is I ask them, I go, is your business on board with going to cloud? Do you have your business stakeholders that are also seeing the value of making this transformation? And then where I'll go to answer your question is, So I view that the conversation I'm having with clients now is 50% tech, 50% how is this going to change your business? I think in about 2 years or less, it's going to be 80, 90% on how this is changing your business. And it's going to be all about business processes and integration with ecosystems. And it's really going to be not very much about the tech side of it, right? That's going to be the underlying platform. So personally, I see it's a big transformation over the last couple of years and the future 2 years on what the actual core conversation is.
It's just fascinating again to me to think about all the offerings that are available, the offerings that are going to be available. And if you ask somebody, probably an average person, their business, they probably end up falling short in thinking about the growth potential of that particular business in the future, not knowing how you're going to easily be able to reach another customer, how you're able to reach another partner, work with another partner going forward. So it's just amazingly expansive.
Yeah, and I think one of the other benefits that cloud brought to business leaders is that it's all about matching your revenue to your expenses, right? And it's all about, hey, look, I don't need to go and invest in millions of dollars before I can bootstrap a business, right? How do I break down what I need from my supply chain or from my technology partners in a way that matches my own growth rate, right? And again, that's what I'm so excited about, that, from a cloud perspective. I mean, so many, that's exactly what, Netflix and Airbnb did for the consumer markets, right? Or sort of the get around or whatever, right? Instead of buying a car, I now can just like take a piece of a car. So I think what I love about what the cloud has done is it's turned sort of these massive capital purchases into much smaller consumable components that businesses can digest. And again, what I love about what HPE and others are also doing is they're also saying, look, that's not a public cloud only value prop. How do we also bring that to our customers' data center or to their edge or to their colo? Because none of us can get away with the only way I'll talk to you is if you're willing to write me a 7-figure check, right? So it's all about growing with you.
Yeah, and maybe just to add on to Arwa's point, that's a huge part, like from a business economics perspective, because a big part for us in our business case on this, it was really about cost optimization and being able to shift, continue to funnel money into keeping the lights on and just running the business to, putting it into the cloud where we're getting advantage of all these capabilities, and advancements, which just made a ton of sense. So it's really changed that mindset and conversation for us as well, and from a financial framework. And then on the revenue side, I mean, all these new capabilities and the benefits of speed and scale, it really does drive, top line growth as well. And it was some huge wins for us in this investment, going through COVID times. It was a big enabler for us as Gap Inc. to launch our, B2B mass business that was less than 3 months. And that had a nice material revenue uplift for us as well. So absolutely, all awesome.
Or what you talked about, for some, this is seemingly like a huge investment of education, time, and money. You touched a little bit about it? Just, maybe for some it's a significant investment, but for others it may not be, and it may be less daunting than it feels initially. Can you talk a little bit about that? Maybe how it scales down to medium-sized business, small business, or even a conglomerate of businesses coming together to help each other?
Absolutely. And I think, to be honest, the newer your business is, the easier this is, right? Because you get to start net new. I think where this gets complex is, if you're a big giant bank, you probably have a lot of investments in existing infrastructure, right? That you now have to think about, how do I modernize that and how do I optimize it to work for me and for sort of the future revenue streams, or, my supply chain, et cetera. So that's always much harder to detangle an existing massive environment. But for those that are lucky enough to be, sort of, I actually think it's a privilege to be a small and medium-sized business, albeit you've got a much smaller boat. And so if the storm is heavier, it is harder, right? But I think that's where I go back to, I love the cloud fundamentals, because it does actually shield you a little bit from that, right? It's all about being able to scale up and down really quickly in turbulent economic times, so that you are able to quickly take advantage of the infrastructure that you need when things spike up, right? So, I mean, I don't know about any of you, but I would have never predicted the economic response or the stock market response that we've seen during these COVID times, right? It was like, are we shut down for 2 weeks and we all reopen our businesses? Or, 7 months later in the Bay Area, I've not left my home office, right? And I've not gotten on a plane. And so that inability to predict then means that you really have to think about again, tying your technology infrastructure roadmap to a, technology partner that can do that with you. But I would also say, look, guys, public cloud is also a lot of cool, shiny objects, and you don't want to be distracted either, right? So this is where the right mix does have to come in. I know a lot of companies where they're like, look, Arwa, I have a static data set and it doesn't need to move. I don't know why I would put it in the East Coast, region of Azure AWS. I have this perfectly functioning, data center that does all that I need. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. That is not necessarily, you are not the use case, right? Like, you have to be smart about what you move and what you don't, and what future capabilities you need to bring in, and whether you do start with the lift and shift to create extra capacity for you and maybe only reserve your on-prem capacity for those workloads where you do actually need a lot of security, governance, control, et cetera, versus the things that you're like, look, if I'm doing quick testing and application development, I need the tooling on top of my infrastructure to facilitate that experience, right? So if I'm a small and medium business, the days that I can create a product in a matter of weeks or an MVP in weeks versus it would have taken me about a year, right, to procure all of the right sort of capabilities. It's amazing, right? The startup community has, I think, the public cloud and probably mostly AWS to thank for the ability to quickly innovate and create these new products. But I'm just as grateful to now, Azure, right, and to GCP and to HPE for continuing to build off of that innovation, right? Again, we all have to give credit to like Amazon. They were the ones that led that. But a lot of companies are now coming on that journey with us, right, that are giving us the capabilities. And again, you have to look at your sort of pain points and the opportunities. Got to do your homework, and then you got to bring the right capabilities.
That's right. That's right. You mentioned maybe it's easier to start fresh. I want to jump over to Alexis and then back to Matt. But on the opposite end, here you were at the Gap with a retail leader and having to make that transition. I'm really kind of curious, the technology implementation, but then also maybe a little bit of the cultural change. And I'm sure you had to deal with that internally. How are you going to shift and educate some folks of how important this is to shift resources?
Yeah, no, that's a great call out, Rodney. So definitely having the luxury of being a small, scrappy business starting from the go is easier in some ways. So for us, a big part that was a core tenet for us when we went through this, it was really on a couple fronts. One was, back to my point, the cloud transformation really has to be aligned and communicated, all the way from the top, right, of the company, and understand the importance and investments needed to drive this change holistically across the organization. So I think that's one really important success factor that was huge for us, that awareness and support to go do this. The other part of it as well that both Arwa and Matt talked about is really selecting, your partners to help move the organization through this journey, because the cloud, purely just from a technology lens, brings a lot of new capabilities and new ways of working. And it really does challenge a lot of your existing processes, both on the technology side and business side. And bringing in a partner for us from the get-go when we really started this journey was a big move for us that has paid off in spades as well. So, we went and selected a cloud partner to come work with us from the beginning. A big part of that is making sure that they bring their best talent in and partner with our engineering talent and our product management and kind of work through what this looks like. And as you go through this change, it's really thinking about change management as well. And there's a significant reskilling that is needed for the workforce. So having a partner come in and be able to pair with your engineers and your teams around it was huge. That really accelerated our learning and adoption as well going through that. Those are just a couple examples that was really critical purely to, continue to move the organization through this. And then maybe the last part, the call out here is for a larger enterprise organization. It does, there's opportunities to kind of rethink about how you organize as well, right? And, one of the things that we've continued to move towards is really drive towards a product model and leverage a lot of the DevOps practices that's out there so that we can take advantage of the value that the cloud brings.
Very good. You guys all can write books about this very shortly, if not right now. There's a question in the chat, and it's to Matt, but maybe Ara wants to touch on it as well. And that is, how do you see the right mix between cloud and private cloud? And from what I'm hearing, it really sort of depends on the actual business and application and use and end goal. But maybe just talk about the balance. of the
Yeah,
two?
I'll hit it really quickly, and then Arlo will definitely have a point of view, I know, on this piece. So, I think for medium and large sized organizations, it's really dependent on the type of application and the type of environment you have, right? There's a lot of reasons why something should stay in private cloud, whether it's data sovereignty, whether it's complexity of the technical environment. And for those cases, it makes business sense. And if you look at how things are architected today, right? You can basically sit a private cloud environment directly adjacent to a public cloud environment and have pretty much zero latency and get the capability of it. So I think it's application dependent and it's infrastructure dependent. The good news is that the advancement on your cloud management platform interfaces have become good enough that many of the elasticity things that you get out of public cloud and resiliencies you get out of public cloud are all there on private cloud now too, right? You just have to build that capability and that interface on top of it to drive the value out of it. Arwa, I think you probably have a
Yeah.
couple ideas as well, right?
Yeah, no, I think, Matt, you absolutely hit it on, right? Which is, we started with the public cloud sort of innovation, right? And that is where you needed to move if you wanted access to some of those APIs or those capabilities. And again, I think the great news for business owners is now you've got companies that are also bringing those capabilities to you, right, in your own data center or your edge, right? If you're a retail operation and you have to have compute and storage, at your physical locations because you can't afford for, your critical systems to go down, that resiliency, that ability to have, no latency, right? The ability to be able to process things. We work with many companies that have manufacturing plants. They can't even have a millisecond of latency. So public cloud is not going to be an option for them, right? So again, that business use case really has to drive what it is that you're doing. But total cost of ownership is also really, really critical, right? I've talked to a lot of businesses that are like, and we used to deal with this at Microsoft. I have a $75,000 overage charge. I have no idea what is going on. You need to explain what is happening, right? So you have a responsibility, right? Because the easier the technology becomes from an accessibility perspective, the easier for you to also overspend. So I can't warn you all enough about governance. Again, it's easy to control when it's in your data center, right? And again, we have a cloud model for on-prem, but people are still even scared because, we can do reservations, right? 80% reserved, which means you could have a 20% buffer. And people are always like, I need you to explain to me how I could potentially hit that buffer and what happens in the case that I do, because I need to plan for it, right? And these are companies as large as Disney to companies that are tiny and small and that may be investing in small amounts of infrastructure, right? Everyone wants to be able to predict their costs because guess what? You sit there and spend just as much time trying to predict your revenue, your costs are just as important. And so again, I would say that those elements are important in terms of total cost of ownership, latency, resiliency, and then the ability to know how much security and control you need. Probably shape your decision about which workloads you want to put in cloud versus which workloads you might want to keep under your own control.
And Rodney, I'm going to add one thing to it, and Alexis hit on this as part of his ways of working and new operating model. Where we see most clients going, regardless of public or private, is they don't necessarily want to be in the server management or the data center business in general, right? They want to take that complexity, hand it to a cloud provider or a partner, and they want their tech folks working on business requirements and being able to hit the auto button to spin up the right infrastructure environment. So I think the key is, regardless of public or private, is creating that capability to automate the infrastructure management and deployment and provisioning so that they can work on more higher value things to the business.
100%. I think that's exactly where, if technology doesn't provide you the ability to free up your resources, then you're right, then it's not the right technology. So that I would say that's 100% what you should be looking for when choosing the right technology partner. Absolutely.
Yeah, that seems like a very important piece. Let me focus on my business and let me depend on all the other vendors and outsources, people out there that do that for 100% of the time. What is becoming very apparent to me in this, it is very much measure twice, cut once if you're considering beginning your journey. And all three of you talk a little bit about the future planning, and you've already sort of touched on it. The pieces where you want to emphasize, investing the most amount of time, laying out the groundwork, what you think you're going to need, what partners you're going to need, to what capacity do you think you're going to need, but a little more about the planning in the future and laying out. And I know Accenture probably deals with a lot of different companies of different sizes, and how you might approach that from the very beginning, and the questions you might ask guiding them through that process.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you use the measure twice, cut once phrase, because a big part of the cloud and agile way of working is moving away from this super long planning process and then moving to a deployment process that's really trying to break those things into small little sprints, be willing to fail a little bit, and then test things and drive value. So I do think there's a combination of the two where, yes, you have to have, I call it a value realization office or a value framework, where you understand the value you're trying to drive out it, and you can measure that as you go along. But then I think equally as much is this is a little bit more about pace and of innovation, and taking a little risk and failing a little bit is absolutely okay, and actually will drive better outcomes overall. So that would be my quick answer. I'm sure Alexis, I'm sure you guys have gone through some of those changes in the way you work, and some of the aggressiveness, as you said, on how you go about your business and application development.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for us, what really paid off was, I think to your point, Matt, it is really twofold. One is you do have to, be willing to take some risks, right? Because you got to learn through this process, because it's new for the workforce, it's new for the organization. But at the same time, we did put a tremendous amount of investment up front to really kind of plan through this and figure out our strategy on what we're planning to do and why, and what's the benefits we're looking to unlock. I thought that was an important North Star for us to really sort out and get aligned on. And then stepping through that is you think about the partners you need to bring in to help make this successful and effective for the organization. I think taking through a structured programmatic view over a multi-year journey is important for a larger enterprise, because there is a lot of legacy processes and technology you have to work through and be planful around. And that was a big part for us, that we had to go through. And then to Arwa's point, with the clouds, as we continue to move a lot of workloads from our data center and some of our private cloud up into the public cloud, there's still the hybrid connectivity you got to figure out between your public cloud provider and your internal data centers and your private cloud, and how the entire network topology and architecture is going to work. So again, you got to plan through that and stepwise through it. So all of that, I think there's a good amount of upfront planning that a lot of enterprises could benefit from, just out of the gate, but not let it slow you down from moving.
Great. There's a question in the chat. Is DR a good first step to using public clouds?
Alexis, did you start there? Did you start with disaster recovery?
Nope.
And for everybody else, disaster recovery is DR. I know it's pretty standard. I'm sure everybody.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I don't think we actually play with that scenario as a starting point. DR is absolutely top of mind for us in the way we've approached the cloud, because one of the benefits with it and a lot of the capabilities is especially on the public cloud side, you get a lot of free redundancy and high availability if you just architect it right. So DR kind of just gets embedded within your overall cloud architecture, which is awesome to see. In terms of where we started, we didn't evaluate it that way. Our pathfinder for how we went through the selection process to start was really taking one of our key product areas that had a good level of maturity, ready to go, a strong business need on our supply chain side, that the cloud could unlock a lot of the benefits around speed and capability, and really started there. And it wasn't taking a small application or a small footprint that wasn't material to the business. We just didn't think that was a good proof point to start the journey and really move the needle and drive the acceleration. So, we went after a material area to get it started and learn. And as we were going through that process, it was getting the foundation stood up. So again, to Arwa's point, on the cloud, you do really have to think about security, your controls, how you're going to manage your costs and all of that, because that rapidly can get out of, control on you. So setting up the foundations and legwork in parallel with that early pilot for us was big. And then it was really attacking where does cloud really unlock the biggest benefits for us. And we went after that next, which, was really to drive a lot of our digital capabilities for the business. So that's how we went through it.
Yeah.
DR is just a side benefit that we're getting out of all of it. So
It is, and there are important considerations for DR. I just worked with a customer who said, look, my SaaS application, like I need to have some DR for my SaaS application. And they had some pretty significant data sovereignty issues because of the financial nature of the information that they collect. In that case, actually, public cloud couldn't be their disaster recovery because it would have been the same data center and that wouldn't have actually provided them the right level of resiliency. So for them, because they already had the application sitting in AWS, their disaster recovery actually had to be their data center. That was the only way that they can get that redundancy. And so I would say, again, those are questions that are highly nuanced, right? It could absolutely be a great scenario. But in some cases, if you have certain data sovereignty issues, again, if in the US, for the most part, I think you can go across the United States, so it could be an easy one. But you have to think about sort of where would your sort of disaster recovery data be and what's the availability that you need access to, and would that be sufficient? Because again, it's one of those things that you don't want to have to think about it, but when you need it, you really do need it.
Touching a little bit from disaster recovery to COVID-19, and so when some of our retail stores had to close, Alexis, and did you see an automatic shift bump? How did you quickly change and realize, whoa, my world all of a sudden might get much busier here, and maybe even trying to shift and grow some of that business that was brick and mortar to e-commerce?
Yeah, I mean, that was a huge disruption for us and across the retail industry and others at large. In the early stages of COVID, store shutdown was absolutely critical for us to get that kind of sorted and make sure, we're looking after our people and not exposing people to risk. So as we went through that, the good thing for us is because of the investment we made in cloud and the momentum we had, it provided a really good accelerant for us to double down our digital capabilities. Because at that point, it was we have to drive revenue lift, right, through other channels and continue to move the business. So cloud was a big unlock to enable all of that for us to move at speed and pace. So going through, the whole store shutdown in the early stages, and then really being able to scale up our e-commerce platform and the digital capabilities to meet customers where they are and continue to provide the right options for them to engage and purchase with us and drive the omni experience was huge. All the way from continue to scale out our BOPIS capabilities, continue to scale up our ship from store capabilities, lighting up a curbside pickup, all of those basic things, the cloud just helped accelerate all of that for our business. And then the other part is we're moving through the COVID journey. Again, it helped us double down on a lot of our digital capabilities and really continue to, build out a lot of these things for our customers in terms of, again, on the digital channel, enabling more payment methods for our customers, whether, integrating with PayPal or providing afterpay options. All of that just continue to evolve with the customer purchase and the customer shifts in behavior. So all of that has been huge for us and continues to be huge.
Yeah. Matt, anything in particular about just the COVID reaction and clients that you had dealt with and how they shift from touchless transactions, et cetera?
I think Alexis hit it. What I saw is clients that, and it wasn't just public cloud, but in general, public cloud, right? The clients that had already had a good foundation in the public cloud, their ability to use the word up front, to pivot, right? And roll out, whether it was a remote worker capability, whether it was more scale on an online digital capability, or it was some type of additional security rollout to support the remote worker. I mean, I had clients that were doing it within days versus weeks. And some of the clients that had more traditional environments and were subject to, procurement lead times and products getting delivered and those things, they struggled a lot more, right? So I think, when we talk about the different values of hybrid cloud and public cloud, one of the big ones is business agility and operational resiliency, right? And I think COVID was a test for a lot of us in a lot of different ways, but there was a clear difference between clients that had that capability already built out and the ones that didn't, on how fast they were able to rotate.
Well, I want to wrap up a little bit and give each of you just a few minutes to give any parting comments you weren't able to share or thoughts. But this has been incredibly educational for me, and I'm sure everyone on this webinar. And I want to thank you for enlightening our Chamber of Commerce members on this. I think we probably would have been having this conversation without COVID, but certainly with COVID, this conversation becomes more important, and that urgency. And Matt, when you talk about revenues doubling for those who made the transition to begin the journey, that should be a green light for everyone to give this some serious consideration. So any closing thoughts or final advice or websites that you want to point them to maybe find research of why and how you should begin your cloud journey?
I'll go quick first, and I'll go quickly. There's no lack of information out there on cloud, right? I mean, I think you can do any search and find a ton of stuff. I'd give 3 things that I would encourage anybody to do, right? Is number one is, I do think you need, regardless of company size, you got to find the right partner, right? There's a war on talent out there, and you need to find some talent that you can scale up and down to help you on this journey, right? And it might be a small integrator, it might be someone large like an HPE or an Accenture or something like that, depending on your size and your need. That'd be the first thing. The second thing is, I couldn't encourage enough, you got to do some co-creation and innovation around your business on this, right? And you got to get, some of your leaders, you got to get some of the tech leaders from whether it's GCP or AWS or Azure, and you got to open your mind on what the capability for cloud is, because there's a ton of, it's really about process redefinition. It's about integration with your clients. It's about getting new data so you can run those algorithms to make good data insights for your customer decisions. So the business side of it is the hardest part, but it's the highest value. And you got to kind of open your mind on what the art of the possible is there. So, and then the third one, what I would say, and I think it was mentioned a couple, is the way you run cloud has to be different, right? You have to have the ability to curate what the new services are, and to make sure you can turn stuff up and down. So don't, be deliberate and make sure you have the way you're going to run it, you've thought through it as well. So those would be my parting thoughts.
Arwa?
Yeah, and I think somebody asked just a last minute question here about why am I hearing so much about multi-cloud? And so I think that's an important part of that education, right? Why do companies go to multi-cloud or hybrid cloud, right? And so we talked a lot about hybrid cloud in terms of what makes sense on-prem versus or private cloud versus public cloud. But I think it is important that, there are going to be a lot of companies that say, look, I'm not going to put all my eggs in one basket, or if there is some kind of outage or whatnot, how do I protect myself? And the other piece of innovation that we're seeing in this market is containerization, right? So containerization, as well as sort of cloud management platforms, right? And the promise there is the portability, that you are not locked in. I've met with significantly sized companies, hopefully similar as big as the ones that we're talking to here, but folks that may have literally a $500 million bill to a public cloud provider a year. And they're like, look, I'm going to lose my every year I lose my negotiating power, right? So multi-cloud is a little bit about, giving you some of that control, giving you the ability to say, I will go to where the capabilities that I need. It is more complex, right? So we always say, like, when you want more control, you also sign up for a little bit of complexity. So it depends on what your business can handle and digest, but that's probably why you hear so much about multi-cloud and hybrid cloud, is there is a continuum of risk, control, as well as sort of simplicity on the other side. So make sure you think about that as well, because you can't both have all the negotiating power as well as have all of the control either. So there is a fine balance between how you manage that for your business.
Great, thank you. Alexis?
And I guess on my part, not to pile on, I mean, absolutely everything Matt and Ara was said for sure. The last things maybe just on my side is, I think just thinking through the journey of where you are and what benefits you're trying to achieve, and just being structured around that. And then continue to focus on the business problem, right? Because end of the day, cloud is an enabler. I think as the capabilities continue to advance and evolve, it'll be much more than that over time. But really focus on the business problem and how does cloud help solve that, whether it's cost optimization, moving at speed, driving operability and scale, all that kind of good stuff. I would really start there first, if, for companies that are trying to figure out how to unlock the value. And then the other part that, I think is important to stress is, especially for enterprises, is also the culture and mindset, right? And I think all of this is just one example with the cloud evolution happening in the industry is continue to attack with a growth mindset and build a culture of learning. Tech is going to continue to change and evolve on us all day long. And it's just a great opportunity to continue to move the workforce that way.
Well, I want to thank all of you. I have a feeling this will not be our last conversation. We are just at the beginning of many of these, this whole new world for many businesses. And I want to make mention that Recology says that they started their cloud journey last year, and Recology has been a great participant and sponsor of the Chamber of Commerce here. And so congratulate them, and hopefully many others are going to join them in their journey very soon. So we'll wrap this particular section. I want to thank the three of you again for participating. Next up in our public policy forum on October 28th, the Port of San Francisco will be visiting us with us to give an update on the seawall projects and its investments in real estate projects along our 7.5 miles of waterfront here in San Francisco. We are going to do an election debrief. Y'all want us to be there. November 4th at 9:30 a.m. We'll be up all night probably. Ebby's on November 4th at 5:30 p.m. and another webinar with the Brookings Institute on workforce and skilling salons. So there's much more from the Chamber of Commerce. This has been a great session, and I really appreciate this. Great partnership with Accenture. Thank you very much, Accenture, and we will see you all next time.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
A pleasure.
Thank you.